Welcome everyone to today's CaFÉ webinar. I hope you're all doing well. My name is Justine Chappell. I am the Communications and Marketing Manager for CaFÉ and ZAP here at West Staff. I'm excited for today's webinar about the 10 do's and don'ts for administering a call for entry on CaFÉ. Some of these are handy tricks to keep you organized, some stem from common mistakes, and some are just some friendly reminders on how to best set up your call for entry. The main key items, even though I'll be going through this list of 10 do's and don'ts, the key items we'll talk about are selecting the correct jury type for your call, outlining the call requirements and the custom form questions, best practices before, during, and after the jury process, and using reports to help you stay organized. So let's go ahead and jump right in to our first tip of the day. So one of the first decisions you make when requesting a new call is deciding on the jury type. CaFÉ has two options, scoring by art and scoring by application. These two options allow you to host calls that may need to be scored differently. Since the jury type impacts the overall workflow for both you and your jurors, the first tip we have here is don't choose the wrong jury type. So I'll go to our jury types help guide that we have on the Help Center. You can access this by clicking the Help tab when you're logged in to your CaFÉ account. And it's the jury types help guide. So let's just start by defining each of the jury types. If you've been around the CaFÉ for a while, these aren't going to be new to you, but hopefully it gives you some understanding about the two different jury types we offer. So the first is scoring by art. This is used when you need to select individual single pieces of art. So by selecting scoring by art, each work sample that the artist submits is separated into individual applications. Scoring by application, on the other hand, is when you need to select individual artists. I'll get to that asterisk there in a minute. By selecting scoring by application, every work sample the artist submits will be grouped together into one application. So in terms of that asterisk, scoring by application can also be used to select pieces of art, but it's when more than one work sample is required to view it. So where it's not so much more than one work sample per artist, it's more like one work sample per artwork. So for example, a sculpture exhibition, they might need multiple views of the same piece of artwork to convey it properly. So in this case, you would use scoring by application to group the images of that one sculpture together into one application. So if I scroll down in this help guide a little more, I'll be able to show you how it kind of affects the applications itself. So here on the left, it shows scoring by artwork, where the work samples, when I say work samples, I mean any image, video, or audio file that's uploaded by the artist. Each work sample is separated into individual entries. So this means that each application, like we're looking at this one here, has only one image on this application, or one audio or one video. So let's say an artist submitted 5 images, audio, or video. It would be all separated out into 5 separate entries. On the other hand, on the right side, scoring by application is where the work samples are grouped together into one entry. This means that applications would have multiple images inside of it, like we see here. So in our example of the artist uploaded 5, or in this case 6 we have here, all of those images are displayed on one application. And scoring by application also means, because you might be conveying one sculpture or one piece of artwork with multiple images in one application, scoring by application also lets you set up so that you can collect multiple applications from every artist. So if you have multiple sculptures that an artist is going to submit, the artist can submit once with 5 images of a sculpture, then they can go back and submit again with the next set of images. And it would be a separate application, and that's set up in the call editor, where you select how many applications are allowed per artist. So just to show a little bit more visually again, on the jury side, scoring by art, again on the left here, kind of shows where we have one work sample with the artwork, and it's given one score. So if you kind of see here, this is what the scorecard looks like to the juror. One score is given to each piece of art and technically every work sample. On scoring by application, The work samples are grouped together, so you're given, the juror gives one score for the group of artwork or for the body of work from that artist. Scoring by application groups them together, and the juror gives one score. And I'll go a little bit back up on the top here to show this list here. We have kind of some lists of calls that are suited for each jury type. So calls best suited for scoring by art, and this is, not an exhaustive list, but they're the most common, are, exhibitions, competitions, any events in which specific pieces of art are being selected and therefore need to be scored separately. Calls best suited for scoring by application are ones such as requests for qualifications or proposals, residencies where the body of work is scored as one to determine which artists are selected. And then again, like I mentioned before, scoring by application calls might be helpful for exhibition when it comes to 3D artwork or artwork that may need multiple view images of the same piece. Even if you might be scoring every individual piece of artwork separately, if you need multiple images per artwork to convey it, then you might need scoring by application. So there are some nuances to how each jury type can be used, but I hope this overview gives you an understanding of the two different types. I also want you to know that this is an important choice to make and that it's always good to double check if you selected the right one. The differences in each type run deeper than just how many images are on each application or how it's scored. It actually sort of dictates how your call is treated at a very technical level. So it affects a lot of different things all at once. So it's important as well because when you start receiving applications, you can't go back and change the jury type. So once artists start submitting their artwork, it's set to that jury type. So we want to make sure that you know the jury type you need ahead of time. So if you have any doubt or need help deciding, you can reach out to the CaFÉ team so that they can gather some info about what you're looking at from your call and help you determine the best jury type. Moving on to our next tip, we have make sure that you do include a complete prospectus in your call's description. A prospectus means that you include all the information and requirements that artists must follow in order to apply to your call. Not only will this help potential applicants know the details of your call and or event, they'll be able to find out if they're eligible to apply and everything that they need to prepare for ahead of time. So let's go into CaFÉ as an administrator. I'm logged in here and I'm going to show you kind of where all this goes. And I'm going to click on our demo call here and I'm going to go to the call editor. So in terms of including a complete prospectus in your call's description, you'll just want to make sure you fill out everything in the event information tab of the call editor. So this includes the call listing details, which if you scroll down, it's on the left. So the short description, that's just your call summary to briefly describe the nature of your call. The long description, this is where you'll put in the call for entry details, and that might include the exhibition date and location. Maybe it's the timeline of your RFQ or RFP process. Maybe the entry fee lists, you can list out what your entry fees are going to be. You can talk about the process for how artists will be selected and notified, maybe shipping requirements or artwork drop-off dates. And then again, since we're still in this post or during pandemic world, the COVID-19 specific information, maybe you have backup plans for your exhibition or online exhibition details that you want to include. So you can add that all in here. And then just also make sure you build out your application requirements section. This is including what the artist needs to prepare ahead of time. So if they need to prepare an artist statement, their resume, references, you want to outline that here. And then in the eligibility section, also list out who is eligible to apply to your call, including, age range for artists or geographic location. You might also include what kind of mediums are accepted, or any other information about the artist that they need to know if they are eligible to apply. And then, of course, the rules and terms to apply. This is like your legal agreement. This is what the artist actually agrees to before they apply to your call. So you'll want to outline your terms and conditions to apply. This might include some of that eligibility information, so you can kind of repeat that here. Maybe your gallery has specific commission information that you want to include in a legal agreement or anything like that. You can put that here. And then as well, just make sure that you include all of the contact information under the organization details, specifically email, so that if an artist has a question about your call for entry, then they can contact you. So there's many different types of information you can include in your call. And I know I just kind of showed you how to include everything in there, but I do want to say you also don't want to overload the description with text that some artists don't even read. We all know, we've all been there, artists not reading the prospectus all the way. So it's kind of just best to have the most relevant information, everything that they need to know, but in a concise way so that they actually read through it and become interested in applying. So, and I'll mention this later, but once you have your information saved, it's a good idea to go to the top and click Preview Call, because that's going to show you what your call details page is going to look to the artist. And you can basically just, review all the information that you've included in those sections and make sure it looks nice, it's easy to read, and that it has everything included. So that is our tip for making sure you have every information piece in your call details. Our next tip comes from kind of a common mistake from administrators, which is activating the categories when not using them. So the submission categories editor allows you to set up categories, and that will organize the entries based on the criteria that you choose. So it could be categories for different artwork mediums, site-specific locations for public art, anything like that. If you activate categories, you must have at least 2 categories for the function to work properly. So I'll go back to the call editor to show you this. This time we're going to go to the application editor tab, and we're going to scroll to the submission category section. So if you have it turned on here, but you don't have any categories created here, 2 things will happen. First, artists will have trouble submitting their application because it will require them to choose a category, yet there won't be anything to choose from. This means that they won't be able to submit their entry altogether. And then secondly, if you have the categories set to on, but you don't have categories created, it actually will inhibit the jurors from being able to score, because the system will be trying to list entries by category, but not have any categories to pull from. So it'll essentially not pull anything into the jury. So make sure if you don't want to use categories, you just turn this setting off. But if you do want it, you can turn it on, and you can add as many categories as you need. You can just add a new one by filling in the blank field and clicking Add New, or you can edit existing ones there. And categories is helpful because it does let you, section out the different entries. Maybe you have jurors scoring different categories, and you can separate them out like that. All right, and then going back to kind of what I hinted on before, our next tip is to make sure that you do preview the call before going live. Previewing the call means previewing both the call description and the application questions to make sure everything is in order. So to preview the call description, that's when you are clicking Preview Call from the Event Information tab. When you click Preview Call, again, it takes you to that call details page, and you can see what it looks like before your call is published. And then to preview the application questions, you're going to first go to the Application Editor tab, then click Preview Call, and you'll be taken to the application itself. For the application, you'll just want to make sure you have all the questions written out properly. You want to make sure you have them in the order that you want them, if you care about the order, and you just want to make sure you have the right question type for your questions, making sure you have like a file upload question type if you want them to submit a file for the resume or something like that. And now that we have conditional logic application questions, the preview lets you test out the application to make sure certain questions are hiding or displaying properly. So for example, this one, we've got some conditional logic questions set up, and I just want to make sure that when I'm clicking through this, they hide properly or show properly. Same thing here too. So just click through that, the preview. It'll also show you the image requirements that you've set up for your call. This is set by you, but is entered by the CaFÉ team when you first add your call to CaFÉ. So if you do need to make any changes to this, just reach out to the CaFÉ team and they can help you update these minimums and maximums. That's our tip for just making sure that you preview both those 2 pages, this one and this one, so that you can see everything that the artist is going to see. All right, next up, I'm actually very excited about this tip because it's time where I get to show off our latest new feature. So this month, we released the Zoom feature for jurors, which allows jurors to zoom in and out of images when viewing them on the scorecard. It also lets them view the image in full screen. So our next tip here is to make sure you do encourage your jurors to check out and use this Zoom feature. It's pretty obvious, and I'll show you how it works, but just let them know it's available. This feature has been a long time coming, and we know it's been highly anticipated, so we thank you for your patience, and we hope you and your jurors enjoy having this feature available. So let me demonstrate for you what this looks like. I'm going to actually log out of my administrator account, and I'm going to log into my juror account. Just remember, if you set yourself up as a juror, which is completely fine, all you have to do is log in to the same page, but with your juror username, and that lets you get into the call as a juror and see that side of things. When you log in with your administrator username, it logs you into the admin side. But you can totally set yourself up as a juror to be able to view the entries and even see the Zoom feature. So I do recommend doing that. And you don't even need to score if you want to add yourself as a juror. You can just add yourself to get access. All right, so to show you the Zoom feature, I'm logged in as a juror. I'm going to select the event I have set up under there. Then I'm going to click on the number of entries to pull up the scorecard for the applications. I'm going to click on this one here because I have them all set up. And then to get to the Zoom feature, you just want to enlarge the image however you're looking at it. So this is available on all 3 scorecards. We're currently looking at the grid view scorecard, but it's available on all styles. The first thing you want to do is just enlarge the image. And so I'll go there. It kind of opens in a new tab for me. And it might take a second for it to load. There it goes. So this is the artwork. And as you can see, we now have the Zoom feature at the top. So you can click on the plus to zoom in, click on the minus to zoom out. It also works on your mouse scrolly thingy or your trackpad. And you can just scroll in and out with that way too. And when you zoom in, you can also click and drag anywhere on the artwork to see all of the different angles of it. And you can see we can get in pretty far here. I'll talk about a little bit in a minute what it means for different sizes of images, but we'll get to that in a second. And then also you can click full screen. I'm not going to do that because it's going to mess up my screen share view here, but if I click full screen, it'll just put it all on my computer so that you can see the full image size. And you can zoom in on that full screen as well. So that's how you use the Zoom. What I'm going to talk about more in my next tip, but this is what I mentioned. Some jurors, or when jurors are looking at images, you might be able to zoom in a lot. Like this one, you can really zoom in a lot, but some images only let you zoom in a little bit. And that just relates to how large the image is that was uploaded by the artist. So the larger the image, the more you'll be able to zoom in and the more detail you'll be able to see, depending on the resolution, everything like that. But the Zoom feature in full screen is available for all images, no matter the size. So we hope this improves your jurors' scoring experience and gives them a few more ways to view the artwork images. So with that, I'm going to move on to our next tip, which is kind of a continuation. So along with adding the ability to zoom in and out of the images, we also made an adjustment to how images in CaFÉ are treated when artist uploads them. Our tip here is to make sure you do encourage your artist to submit images that are 1920 pixels or larger on the longest side. The file still needs to be a maximum of 5 megabytes. So I'll start by saying we did not update the requirements for images to be uploaded to CaFÉ. Images still must be at least 1200 pixels on the longest edge and must be no larger than 5 megabytes and must be JPEGs in order to be accepted by the system. That's still the same. What's different is that in the past, CaFÉ would actually size down the images that were larger than 1920 pixels on the longest side to fit 1920 in order to fit our system's jury setup. But that's no longer the case. So as long as the file itself is no larger than 5 megabytes, an artist can upload any sized image to CaFÉ. This will make the images appear even better on the scorecard and really show those details nicely to the juror. So by adding the zoom functionality, we also made the image sizing less restrictive in order to make the zoom really worth it. So to recap, we recommend artists to submit images that are not only 1200 pixels on the longest edge, because that's the minimum, but you can encourage them to submit images that are at least 1920 pixels. Because essentially, like I said before, the larger the image, the more the juror can zoom in and view some details. I'm going to just kind of quickly demonstrate this to you. The image that we were looking at before, this is an image that is 4,000 or I think 4,900 pixels on the longest edge. So it's a pretty big file. I think the file itself is about 4 megabytes. So it's a pretty big image. I set up a couple demonstrations here where I can show you this next one. This one was uploaded as 1920 pixels, which is that recommended size, at least recommended size on the longest edge. And you can see I can still zoom in a lot and pick up some additional details. So we got that, but I can't zoom in as far as I could with that other one. And then finally, we had our smallest. This meets the minimum requirements to be accepted by CaFÉ. So this image is actually 1,200 pixels. I just realized you might not be able to see the same clarity as I can because of Zoom, but the Zoom that I'm talking through right now, not the jury Zoom. But you'll be able to see here, this is all as far as I can zoom in. I can't zoom in any farther than this, whereas that first one I could zoom in a lot. So even though it meets the minimum requirements and it's still a pretty clear image, I can't zoom a whole lot because the image is only 1,200 pixels. So that kind of just demonstrates how different sizing images appear. So it is a good idea to just, encourage artists and hope that they upload high quality images. You can certainly stipulate size image requirements in your own prospectus if you want to make sure your artists are uploading a certain size. But keep in mind that artists will always be able to apply to the call with any sized image, so long as that it meets CaFÉ's minimum of 1,200 pixels. So we can actually change the requirements for a certain call for entry. But we can just encourage you to have on your prospectus that 1920 on the longest edge is a recommended size, but they can go larger if their file does not exceed 5 megabytes. And we'll also be putting out some resources for our CaFÉ artist community about how they can ensure that they have the best image files for their entries. So those will come around in the beginning of next year. We hope that will kind of improve the jury process for both artists, jurors, and administrators. So the next tip we have here is also speaking of the jury process and scoring the entries. Our next tip is to make sure that you do have your jurors assign all of the entries a score. So I know there's different methods for scoring. Some use the yes, no, maybe scoring type or 1 through 7. And I know some jurors like to score a certain way, such as only making a score for what they're selecting, but leaving everything else alone. It will be later important for you later in the process that each entry has a score assigned to it. So to explain this more, I'm going to go back to our administrator side. So I'm going to log out again. And I'm going to log back in as an admin. I'm putting my code real quick. Okay, so to talk about this, I'm going to head to the jury administration page. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to show you a little bit of the process from moving the scored entries to the not invited or invited statuses. And along the way, it'll kind of show you why it's important to have your jurors score all of the entries. So the first thing, what we're going to assume here is that you can see we have a juror that scored the entries. You'll see we have 22 scored. We have 27 up here in application. So that means that at the end of this, you'll see that 5 were not scored. So let's just go through the process. Let's say the juror scored everything, and I'm going to go to the Manage tab. And the first thing I'm going to do is change our lower scored entries to the not invited status. I'm going to click Change Status to Not Invited. On this page, I'm going to choose all my categories, so I'm moving everyone at once. And then I'm going to set a minimum cutoff score for which any entry scored lower than the threshold will be removed, aka moved to the not invited status. They're not actually getting removed anywhere. So for example, if I want the entries with a score of 4 or higher to move forward to the next round, I want the entries below 4 to be changed to not invited. So I'll set my cutoff score to 4. Anything that is below a 4 will get changed to not invited. So let's just say I did that. That's actually, it doesn't look like our average score likes that. So I'm gonna, for the purposes of this, I'm gonna keep it at the minimum cutoff score defaults to the average score. So I'm gonna do that now. So I'm gonna do that. And then here's kind of where a tip goes in. So let's say your juror only scored the entries that they want to keep for the exhibition. All the other entries they didn't score we're left with a blank score. So since this step of changing the status using the cutoff score does not take into account entries with blank scores, you won't actually be able to change their status in this step and will instead change it manually. So this then opens the door a little bit for human error and just kind of makes it a little bit more messy. So if the juror makes sure to score all the entries, all you have to do is plug in your cutoff score and you'll be able to sort all the entries in these 2 steps. But let's just keep going to show you how that's completed. So I'm going to click Show Applications. I'll scroll down and I'll see here the total to be moved to the not invited status is 9, and I can kind of just verify that those scores, no's and our maybes, that looks good. I'm going to send it to the not invited status. So I'll go ahead and click Change Status. You'll see it then says it was successfully moved. Then what I'm going to do is click Manage again, and I want to now change the highest scored entries to invited. So I'm going to click Change Status to Invited. Again, at this step, I'm going to select all my categories, and then I'm not going to touch this maximum cutoff score, and that's because I want to move all the entries to the invited status. So I'm going to make sure that everyone scored above a 0, which is everyone left with a score, goes to invited. So I'll leave that there. Then I'll click Show Applications. Again, I can kind of verify, okay, yep, my juror scored yes on all these entries. Those are going to become invited. Go ahead and click Change Status. So when I return to the jury admin page, even though we just did those steps to, essentially move everyone, or what we thought was everyone, to invited or not invited, if I click View Scored Applications here, you'll see we still have 5 applications that are in the jury to be judged. So you'll see that these don't have a score, and that means they weren't included in either of those steps, moving them to invited or not invited because there was no score to even take into account. So they'll just be stuck in the receive status unless you come here or maybe to the events management table. You can actually update the score from here. So, you can go ahead and update to invited and it'll, drop it off, or however many you have. So this is how you can do it manually. But if you're not sure if the juror intended to include them or not without that juror's score in there, it'll just require maybe a couple back and forths between you and your juror. So that's why I just recommend making sure your juror scores every single entry, even if it's just going through what's remaining and clicking no on everyone or the lower scored or whatever it is. That's our tip about that. Let's head to our next tip here. So once you've done all the jury stuff, our next one is to make sure you do notify all artists of the jury results. This means notifying both the not invited and invited batches of artists. I'm not going to spend too much time going over this process, but to show you, you'll do this in the Events Communication tab. And when you email your artists, you'll, click the not invited status or the invited status. You'll do them separately because they'll have different messages. Click Draft Email. Draft your email. This one to the invited artist would, be more of a congratulations letter and info for next steps. Then you click Preview. I don't have this filled out, so I'm not going to do it. And then you go ahead and send it. Then when you are ready, you would come back to this and send a separate email to your not invited batch or vice versa. So it's important to notify all artists for a number of reasons. First, it's just good practice to let artists know of the status of their entry because they took time and sometimes money to pay the entry fees. So it's important to just thank them for their entry and let them know that they haven't been invited. Secondly, if your call is juried by individual pieces and you have artists submit multiple entries, it's important to send emails to both of these groups because if they have some pieces in invited and some pieces in not invited, those emails are going to list which pieces, if your call is set to scoring by art, it's going to list which pieces are invited or not. So sending both of those letters is just going to ensure that they know which pieces are invited or which pieces are not. They can also check their CaFÉ account, and you can always include that in your message to check the CaFÉ account to see which pieces are invited, but it is just important to send both of those emails out. One other thing about this is that, if you're notifying your artists and you're saying things are final, this kind of goes into my next tip, but artists will be able to see their status in their CaFÉ account if you set your jury status to complete. So that essentially publishes the results. And with that, I'll just go into our next tip, which is don't forget to set the jury status to complete. and then check this prevent artist from archiving setting. So back here, if I go to jury administration, in the setup section under jury status. So this is what you need to set to in progress in order to let the jurors start scoring. But then once that's done, and once you've sorted everyone in between invited and not invited, that's when you can go in here and set that to complete and click save. And that publishes the results of the status for every artist in the application in their CaFÉ entries account. It's not going to send any automatic email, so don't worry about that. You will have to send those emails just like I showed you. But this makes it so that they can see their status. And then it does another thing, which is this other setting in the events management page. And I'll go to the call editor. And down below on the event information tab, we have this setting here called prevent artists from archiving entries. So this is a kind of a backend setting that just allows artists to, once you're done with their entries, allows them to archive their entries on their account. So they can't do that until it's done. So this status actually remains on while you're conducting and collecting entries, but needs to be turned off when your jury is complete. Good news is that when you set your jury status to complete, this actually automatically switches to off. So that's why it's off now, since I just changed our status to complete. So you don't really have to worry about this, but it's a good idea to just come here and check. That way, if you stop using CaFÉ because you're done with this process, you don't kind of forget about it, and artists aren't left having to wait for you to set this setting so that they can archive their entries. We have one more thing to talk about today, and that is our last tip, which is to use the income breakdown report to track entry fee revenue for your call. The income breakdown report is an itemized list of artist purchase transactions with dates, fee types, and lists if coupons were used. If you collect entry fees for your call, you'll want to be familiar with this report for your accounting needs. So back in the admin side, you'll find this report under the dashboard, reports, and then income breakdown. The first thing you'll do is select the date range that you want to pull the data from. And then you want to, actually here, I'm going to set this to a few years back because we have some old entries. If you did not collect entry fees, or maybe you do have some artists that had a free entry fee with a coupon, you want to uncheck this hide all $0 transactions. That will make sure it pulls up every transaction, not just the ones that were paid. And then I'll go ahead and choose the call here. You can choose to just download the report only. So if I check this box and I click run report, it's not going to show me the report on this page. Instead, it'll just initiate a download of the spreadsheet. You can also check this option here to just have it email you the spreadsheet when it's ready. Maybe you have a really, really large report and it's going to take some time to load on your page here. You can check that and it'll email you to let you know when the report is ready. But if you just want to see it on your page, you'll click run report. And here it will list all the transactions for each artist who applied and submitted to the call. So it'll list, the fee here. This is where the entry fee will be listed, or if you have an additional media fee here, it'll show you how many fees and what fees they paid. It'll also show you, I don't know if I have anything here, but it'll also show you right around this area if a coupon was used, so you can track how many coupons were redeemed. And at the bottom of the report, you'll see a total income for the period. So that's, the date range you set up, or the income for your whole call. And so you'll see the total that was collected. That's the collected here. It will show you the credit card fee total. So that's the 3.25% transaction fee for all users paying by credit card. That's deducted from the remittance that CaFÉ sends you. And then the net amount. So the net amount is what you can pay attention to see what fees you're expected to receive during the month. You can set your date range to the month prior, run the report, and then check that net amount, and that should tell you the fees that you should see in the next remittance, less any CaFÉ fees owed to us for additional media or applications. Those fees will be assessed separately. This income breakdown report can be handy when you need to verify whether an artist successfully completed their transaction, the total entry fees and media fees paid. It might also help you determine how much you'll receive in those checks, like I said. So just like any reports too, you can download it at the bottom with spreadsheet, CSV, or tab file. And then you can download those maybe for your record keeping. You can download and save those so you have that outside of CaFÉ. So this concludes our 10 do's and don'ts for administrators. I hope you learned some handy tips and know some of the mistakes you want to avoid when hosting your call. And then Dawn, your question here, how does the maybe get changed in the yes, no, maybe option? Yes is invited, no is not invited. What happens with the maybes? Yeah. So to understand that, you have to understand that yes, no, maybes convert to numerical scores when it comes to the actual sorting process. So the yes is equal to a 3, a maybe is equal to a 2, and the no is equal to a 1. So I've already done it, so you can't really see it as much in here. But when you go to the change status to not invited, if you want your maybes to become not invited, you'll want to set your minimum cutoff score to 3 so that anything below 3, meaning anything below a yes, meaning your no's and your maybes, will get changed to not invited. If you want your maybes to go into the yes category, you'll only set your minimum cutoff score to 2 because you're only saying anything lower than a 2 is going to go to not invited. So you just want to determine what batch it's going into, and then make sure you include that in your minimum cutoff score. I hope that helped. Thanks. Good question. And I have a question here. Does invited have to mean they are chosen, or can it mean they're invited to the next round of judging? Yes, I would say tread lightly on that, because if a next round of judging occurs, technically in CaFÉ, you have to make sure they're in the received status or else they won't show up on the jury side. But what you can do is you can sort it first. Maybe you know the higher score to the people that are going to go on. Maybe they're still in the received status. You don't officially put them in the invited, but you can let the received folks know, hey, you've been moved forward to the next round. And that way they'll just know. And then at the very, very end is when I recommend putting them into the invited status. You could separate them out, inform the invited folks that they've been invited to the next round, and then put them back into received status. But I think it's just easier to leave everyone in received until it's final. And then do I have any resources to share with jurors that lay out the process? Yes, so in the Help Center, which you can access by going to the menu and clicking Help Center, this brings up, well, actually, I'll just click on it here. We have our Help for Jurors. Jurors can also access this Help Center. It's down here, Help for Jurors. And you can send them this link, and that shows them the process. So this is how to log in and open the scorecard. And then depending on which view you set up for them, we have different instructions. So if they have the slideshow view, it'll tell them the steps for accessing the slideshow scorecard and how to score and everything. And it has, what they can do to click on the thumbnails, view the artist statements, how to score and save their scores and everything. So Help for Jurors guide. From Eugene, can artists check that? And if it's still in progress, they know that we aren't through jurying. Yeah, so if your jury status is in progress, what the artist will see instead of their status, it'll say scoring in progress, jury round, and it'll say if it's in round 1 or round 2 in progress. It's not going to say whether or not that artist is in the second round of jurying or in the first round. It's just going to say the jury is still taking place. So it'll say that instead if it's set to in progress. And then from Janet, do you send your invited, not invited email before or after you set your status to complete? It's up to you. I think it's best to email first. That's just because if you email everyone, that's kind of their first notice they get from you and it's more personal. Whereas if you were to set your jury status to complete, and I don't know, maybe it takes a while for you to draft your emails and stuff. Maybe an artist would log into CaFÉ to check their status and they see their status updated. That's not so much the first kind of touch point you really want, unless you don't care about that, which is fine. But I recommend emailing first. And then once you send those emails, head to the jury and set that to complete. Thanks again for joining our webinar today. Be sure to join our next webinar in January.